Hello and welcome to The Pledge. Well, this week saw the Aussie cricket team on a sticky wicket. I thought we could start our own pledge team to take them on. June, you can be silly mid-on. Rachel, you can be silly point. Majid, you're a short leg. And Nick, you can't play because you've been tampering with your balls. Coming up, June thinks Trump is weathering the storm. Majid defends jokes, even when they involve Nazis. Nick thinks we've had a breath of fresh air in the Me Too debate. Rachel argues Easter is losing its meaning. But first, it's me. I want to talk about the latest hysterical attempt by the anti-Democrats to overturn the referendum result. First, they blamed racists for it, then a selfish older generation, then Murdoch, then the Daily Mail, then the Russians. Now they're screaming 17.4 million Brexiteers were duped into voting leave because a few extra 100,000 quid was passed from one campaign group to another. So if that swung it for leave, how come the £9 million the government spent sending leaflets to every household in Britain didn't swing it for Remain? Those fighting to overturn Brexit need to believe it was a cheat, a conspiracy, a brainwashing exercise, because they refused to see what it really was. An enraged scream by people who felt abandoned, ignored and patronised by our political and liberal elite. What these supercilious, self-serving Remainers need to realise is the public's moved on. A recent poll showed a 57% majority of us just want to get on with getting out. This week marks a year before we exit the EU and go global. The anti-Democrats need to get used to that.
Who needs a satirist? Who needs satirists when Carole parodies herself now so efficiently?
You guys, actually, you supercilious Remain.
No,
that's
Carole, thanks. As speaking as an hysterical anti-democrat, yes. I think you're right. I don't think that the referendum result is going to be unhinged by any technicality, but you still fail to address some really key issues that do remain, and no pun intended. Yes, 17.4 million people voted to leave, but they didn't know what they were leaving for. So let's throw it forward. Let's throw it forward. Let's not go back and fight the referendum again. Let's just remember.
Well, but you keep on trying, and that's not true.
No, we're not fighting the referendum. What we need to look at is we've got a year from today until we leave the EU. Therefore, we have got to make sure that the deal that is in place, when Parliament gets to have its vote on the deal, is good enough for the country to benefit and prosper outside the EU. Therefore, I think Keir Starmer, who is the shadow Brexit secretary, is exactly right. Yep. And instead of just enacting the result of the referendum, which we should remember was advisory, but the government converted that into mandatory.
Wait.
Didn't say that. Hold on, Carole. Anyway, let us just finish. Let me just finish.
No, but can we go back to what I'm talking about?
No, we can't. I want to finish my point. Okay. No, I'm just going to finish my point, which is this. When it comes to the deal, let us assume, I don't think this is going to happen, by the way. I think Parliament is going to vote for the deal because they're going to be whipped into submission. But if Parliament votes against the deal, then I think that the following should happen. That the vote on whatever the deal is should be turned to MPs, not ministers. And MPs should be given a free vote on the deal, and let us take it from there.
Well, you said that before. What I wanted to go back to was, do you think this latest attempt to derail it is a load of old nonsense?
Can I just say something?
I said we're not going to have it unhinged by technicality.
On this latest, I'm actually interviewing this guy on my radio show on Sunday on ABC, Shami, the whistleblower. And one thing I know for a fact, well, hold on, that's a bit harsh. He was actually outed as being gay against the wishes of his...
Well, hang on. If he didn't want the world to know he was gay, why did he take part in the Gay Pride March if he didn't want the world to know he was gay?
Because when you're sitting in Pakistan, you're not going to be watching the Gay Pride March in London. No, I can guarantee you you're not. I can guarantee you're not, right?
Let's move on.
You know, I think outing people is unethical, right? And I don't think we should be justifying it. I think people have the right to define themselves.
It had to be done for his boyfriend to qualify why he did it.
I'm shocked.
I'm speechless.
Carole, I'm speechless.
Why,
Carole, there's very rarely can you say something that actually shocks me.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
He could have refused. Anyway, let's not go.
Do you actually say... But seriously,
Carole, I'm not going to get into that with you.
Argument. I think
Magic, carry on.
Brexit. I don't think we're going to actually win if we try and say it's actually ethical to out people without their permission.
I didn't say it was ethical to out.
You just said it had to be done.
Stop. I said for this guy to qualify why it was done. Stephen, his ex-boyfriend.
This conversation.
No.
Oh, please.
We do have a grab.
Right. Okay.
By the way, can we actually, in order to calm things down, can we go to?
And there is absolutely no evidence.
Can we go to Joe Coburn's Daily Politics and hear from the man in question?
His claims.
Have you got the sort of the smoking gun that says you must spend the money in this way, and we are telling you to spend it with this group? You have no job. You don't.
No, we don't. The evidence is to do with coordination and how every decision was run through senior members, how AIQ was based in the Vote Leave office, how I had never heard of AIQ when the decision was made.
That kind of proves my point. Absolutely no evidence.
What were you saying,
Well, I was going to make a point about Brexit, actually, and that is that your introduction that this is an attempt to derail Brexit strikes me as rather curious, because the man we just saw on the screen there still believes in Brexit, still wants Brexit to happen. Now, if we take what he says at face value, and I don't see any reason not to, because I like to think good of human beings. Because there's no evidence,
that's why.
Well, hold on, let me make my point.
No written evidence.
My point for the last
well, you
10
said there's no reason not to.
Can I actually make my point, guys? Can I actually say what I'm trying to say? Right, so he says he did it because he believes in democracy and the rule of law. I believe him. I don't think that this derails the Brexit result. He himself believes in Brexit. The Electoral Commission has no powers to derail the sovereign vote of this nation. All this is an inquiry, as there are many inquiries, into what happened during the referendum, including on the Remain side. I agree the 90 million that was spent by Cameron using taxpayers' money should have been looked into, wasn't ethical as well. And so, actually, if it is about the rule of law and democracy, then that investigation applies on both sides.
No, can I bring Nick in?
No one's trying to derail Brexit.
Just saying, for legal purposes, let's just see what a solicitor for Vote Leave has to say to the point you just made, Majid. Vote Leave has twice been cleared on this matter by the Electoral Commission, as has been the case throughout. Vote Leave is obligated to review to the extent it can after this long elapsed period since the referendum all such allegations, and is doing so. We will, as appropriate, share any relevant findings with the Electoral Commission, again, as we have always done. Briefly, Carole, you've got me until... You're almost saying, whatever the deal, we must just go forward. Of course we have to respect, and of course we must leave. And I think every sane politician agrees that. I'm a little concerned, Majid. I respect your position, but... I'm so sorry, I think it might have been you, Rachel, one of you saying that the MPs should have a free... It was your idea, Majid.
What are you frightened of? Yeah.
I'm not frightened of anything, because I sense that there is a mood within many quarters of Westminster that they do not reflect what the British people have voted for. Exactly. And it would be a terrible abrogation.
That's so condescending and demeaning, and you guys keep saying this.
Three-quarters of MPs were on the side of Remain. So of course he's stating a fact.
I don't think that's a fair reflection, but we must make sure it's the right deal. So you shouldn't be the sort of World War I gang-ho, or even gung-ho. Let's go. Let's get a measured deal. But the idea of free, I genuinely think, would be very, very unfair to the British people.
What Mrs May put forward last week, Nick, and you'd have to admit that this was a deal that would probably suit everyone.
What would be unfair to the British people is taking the economy over a cliff.
You tell me not to talk about people. There you go. Well, what happened? The deal that she put forward last week, that we will remain in exactly the same position for the next 21 months, isn't the deal that every hard Brexiteer wants. But we're prepared to do that to make sure that we don't fall off a cliff and to make sure that everything is prepared. And I think...
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course you can.
Thank you. So, as a supercilious Remainer, hysterical, I find this really interesting, because I think if this was the other way round, there's no way that you would be saying what you're saying. If this was Remain that had overspent, and if this was Remain that had a whistleblower... No, it's not!
No. They did. Let June finish.
Let me finish. But what I'm saying is, if we had broken the rules, which is what... this is what the whistleblowers are alleging.
There's no evidence that the rules have been broken.
But the whistleblower is alleging that. If that was the case, you would be saying the elitist Remainers using their money and influence.
But you would not be saying this. You keep on repeating things in this argument.
Right when it's your side.
But it's not right, because I think the Remain finances should also be looked at as well. I'd like to say how much
the parliamentary secretary of the Cabinet Office, Chloe Smith, Conservative MP, has made some remarks. I think it's worthwhile having a look at what she had to say in Parliament.
The Electoral Commission concluded that it was a well-run poll and that it was delivered without any major issues. Now, we also know that it was one of the largest democratic exercises in our history. I recognise, indeed we've seen it here today, that that referendum and its subject matter elicits high emotion.
So, elicits high emotion, as we've just seen in this debate. But I can assure you, Carole, let me, as a Remainer, say to you, I don't think that this is about derailing the Brexit vote. I'm not trying to derail the Brexit vote. I will assure you that from my perspective, and the reason I'm keen to interview this whistleblower is because actually it's just about the rule of law. I believe him when he says he believes in Brexit and he's more interested in democracy and the rule of law.
He doesn't believe in democracy if he's saying that there's been messing about. You can't just keep on saying he believes in democracy when he's trying to derail it. Why did he do this magic if he wasn't trying to derail it?
Because, Carole, you can believe
there was cheating going on.
You can believe in the rule of law.
There's no evidence for the cheating going on. We've got to stop this. There was absolutely...
Basically, he's saying there was ball tampering, OK?
Yeah.
It's like saying therefore the game wasn't played by the rules.
He was asked if there was any evidence for what he was saying, not a jot.
But Carole, can you not see that with Rachel's example there, you can love cricket and be upset if there's ball tampering and still love cricket? He loves Brexit. He wants Brexit to happen, but he wants it to happen fairly.
You know that
according to his own words.
He said that.
He's already said it in other interviews.
He's also said there was cheating, and there's no evidence of this. So just because he says it, June, doesn't mean it's true.
Not everything is an attempt to derail the Brexit vote.
You must stop talking to me like I'm a moron, like I'm a leaver, because that's what you're doing.
Carole, we will have to agree to this.
I'm perfectly calm. You're just patronising, like lots of Remainers are.
Carole, we'll just have to agree to disagree on this one.
Forever.
Anyway, moving on. So, forget Carole and Majid and forget the beast from the east. There's a storm brewing across the Atlantic called Daniels, and she makes Katrina look like an April shower. I'm talking about the revelations by adult film actress Stormy Daniels of her alleged affair with Donald Trump. As sleazy as it is, our fascination with political sex scandals is in danger of distracting us from the real problems Trump's presidency faces. It's not often that you'll find me defending Donald Trump, but he's never misrepresented himself. Perhaps politicians had previously been held to an unattainable standard, and Trump's undignified behaviour has brought our expectations of those in public office down to earth with a thud. Now, I look forward to the day when Donald J. Trump is out of the White House and back on the golf course for good. But if anything brings Trump down, it should be his performance in office rather than in any other room. Compared to all the potential inadequacies of Trump's presidency, I think this scandal is more, and I borrow from my dear friend Nick Ferrari, a storm in a D cup.
I'm just when you go adult, would she play a rabbit or something like that?
I'm sure there is. She's got a great body of work.
She has a great body of work. Can I start by saying something? Much as you said you never thought that you would necessarily be a defender, I was a mild fan at one point, but actually all hail President Obama, and because he sailed through 2 terms and there was never a whiff of scandal, and I think that is to be applauded.
Yeah.
Does it mean... Yes, I think you're probably right. I think that politicians are, by and large, held to too high a standard. They only reflect society.
Yes.
So there are some radio presenters who live some rather dodgy backgrounds. There are some radio presenters who live tremendous backgrounds. There are some journalists who have rather dodgy backgrounds, and there are some journalists who we can admire.
Yes.
And I think it is the same with politicians.
Yes.
And what worries me is there could be somebody out there who could hold the solution to the problems in the Middle East.
That's
who
a
could
great
hold the
point.
solution, and they look at it and they think, actually, I don't have the greatest background. I am a bit of a boy or a bit of a girl, and I'm not. Why do I want to put my head above the back? And that's what concerns me.
No, look, actually, I'd like to bring in. Look what happened to my old friend Toby Young, who they dug up some historic tweets, and he was actually running the New Schools Network, which is a government-funded charity. You know, and I think that you're right, and people aren't going to want to enter public life.
Do you blame them?
And you can't blame them.
Do you know what, June? I think Storm Daniels, I rather liked her.
Did you like the interview?
I loved the fact she was straight on there. She said, I'm not a victim. Don't class me in with Me Too. I'm not a victim.
It was consensual.
She said it was I ended up in a room with a creepy old man who hinted that he might give a turn on The Apprentice. So she said, I slept with him. And she actually said, I have not made nearly enough money out of this yet. And I think, good on you, girl. And the thing is, she is the kind of person who...
running the Treasury. Chancellor of the Exchequer.
But the people who voted for Trump were like, she's straight on down the line. She even, and I love that line in the story where when she met him, she offered to spank his backside with a copy of Forbes magazine that had his face on it.
Now, let's have a look to see.
She's a worthy
Let's have a
adversary.
look to see if any of this has actually harmed Trump in any way whatsoever. Because the truth is that if you look at this, there's been absolutely zero change on his approval ratings. If you look at that 2017, 2018, 39% approved then, 39% approve now. The only difference has been is less people disapprove.
I think the Democrats are going to need the love child of Florence Nightingale. Stand a chance. They really are.
I'm really glad you raised this, Jim, because actually it's a brave topic for you to raise. People will accuse you of defending Trump. And the truth is that actually, as you and I know, it used to be Conservatives that used to pry into Liberals' private lives and moralise about it. Since when were Liberals about moralising about personal sexual conduct? And unfortunately, partisan politics has got in the way and they've upended their values. I personally think that a politician's private life, as long as they're not breaking the law, it should stay in private.
And also, I think the Democrats have to be very careful because in spending so much time on this, actually, it takes away from the real stuff. And your average...
The problem is... Remember what Stormy Daniels, it wasn't just a one-night stand and in exchange for telling The Apprentice. Afterwards, she alleges that she was approached in a car park.
Threatened.
Her daughter was saved, who was threatened. You know, she was apparently allegedly paid off by his lawyer, which could be a campaign funding issue. And also, but I think you're right in the sense that Trump has never hidden the fact that he's basically a sexual... I'm allowed to say a sexual predator because he said, you know, as we remember... I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet just kiss. I don't even wait. When you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the... You can do anything.
We know who we're dealing with.
And I suppose it's all been baked into the Trump profile. And, you know, this is what Trump had to say about his own alleged peccadillos.
That was locker room talk. I'm not proud of it. I am a person who has great respect for people, for my family, for the people of this country. And certainly I'm not proud of it. But that was something that happened.
And if the Stormy Daniels was just a storm in a teacup, why did the US expel 60 diplomats as an amazing dead cat diversionary tactic when the night that she went on CNN?
Just before any attorney, as they call them over there, gets too excited, we're not, of course, suggesting that the president is a sexual predator. Let's hear from White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah on this.
With respect to that interview, I will say the president strongly, clearly, and has consistently denied these underlying claims, and the only person who's been inconsistent is the one making the claims.
And a story isn't a story without a tweet from the president, so let's see what Donald Trump has said. So much fake news, never been more voluminous or more inaccurate, but through it all, our country is doing great. Which, coming back to your central point, actually, by many indicators, if we now go to, all right, the stock market, fintech is off a little bit, but if we go to job creation, if we go by and large, it's not doing bad.
I'm not giving him job creation.
But employment, 17-year low.
Yes,
more people.
But there's a lot of what the seeds were sown elsewhere.
But more people agree with what he's doing with the economy than don't.
But that's not my point with Trump. But my point here is we're putting so much focus on all of this nonsense when actually what we should be looking at is what's going on in terms of the spending of the family, what's going on with Russia. There are more important things where he's concerned that we should be looking at, not who he dated in 2006.
He's important. What he worries about is what people at home think of him, you know? He cares about America, and the people in America like what he's doing. I mean, you said his approval rating hasn't changed. It has, actually. Since February, it's gone up 7 points. It went down, and now it's gone up again. So the people who voted for him still want him there.
There's one thing I am concerned about, and that is that will the office of presidency ever be seen in the same light?
No way, not for a long
time. The way in which, you know, you mentioned Obama, President Obama, and I had many criticisms of Obama's foreign policy, especially in Syria. But you're right, his presidency is sailed by it. It looks like a golden era now compared to what we're seeing.
As regards moral behaviour.
About the dignity of the office of the president, you know? And I just wonder, because we had that in Britain, our politics, we actually had a lack of deference to our politicians. We've had that for a long time, and we were met with scandal after scandal, and people don't really admire or look up to their politicians and political leaders. Whereas America had something different. The office of the White House was a prestigious an honourable position to hold. And I wonder if it's become more British in that sense.
No, I think it will be again. I think it'll go exactly back to where it was. He's a one-off. And
I don't know.
All the presidents they've had, they haven't had a single one like Trump. He is literally a one-off.
Which is why we don't know. Yeah. We don't know until the next person comes in. We don't know.
Like, for example, you showed that clip, Nick, with I thought, who's that? I thought, and you mentioned that. I thought, no, I've never, because he's had sacked so many people, and that the revolving door in his staff is so high. I don't even know who that was anymore. I followed it.
I thought you were going to say the pledge. Anyway, I've got I've got a clip of Roseanne Barr. Let's have a look what she had to say.
He's the president, and that's it. He's the president, and we're in a war. So, you know, I think we should all pull together and try to get over our great divide.
Did you watch the Stormy Daniels interview last night?
No, I don't care about that.
So obviously Roseanne Barr is the comedian, and what's interesting about...
She's channeling Carole Malone, because she says we should all get together and get over the great...
Why does she have to chew gum when she's making a point?
It's Roseanne.
She's Roseanne. But what's interesting with Roseanne is her TV show just returned, came back on air earlier this week, and it's the highest-rated show in 6 years, highest-rated scripted show in 6 years, and the family are a pro-Trump family. So that's quite interesting. Maybe what you're saying is true, Carole.
Talking of Roseanne the comedian, we're going to move to another comedian who's got himself into trouble. YouTube prankster Mark Meechan has been convicted of a hate crime after posting a video of his dog doing a Nazi salute to phrases including the horrific "gas the Jews." Apparently, and understandably, this rather puerile joke caused gross offence. But however unfunny the joke was is irrelevant, surely, to the principle of free speech. Defending speech you agree with isn't defending free speech at all. It's only defending yourself. Defending free speech only applies when you disagree. Now, viewers have every right to be offended by my speech, but no one has a right to insist that I don't offend them. Else we may as well just say nothing at all. Criminalising a hitherto unknown comedian for his unfunny joke is something we'd expect from the Nazis themselves. Remember Basil Fawlty or Allo Allo? This judge should be ashamed of his chilling precedent. How do we lampoon ISIS, for example, if by imitating them we're to be accused of glorifying terrorism? The correct response to a joke that you don't like is simply not to laugh at it. And just as a warning that some viewers might find the language used in this debate uncomfortable.
You see, you've got me puzzled here, Majid, because a couple of weeks ago on this show, I was actually defending free speech, and you were telling me that you made it perfectly clear to me, told me in no uncertain terms that free speech can turn into hate speech. And one of the quotes you said was, you said, language used in newspaper that stokes up anti-Muslim sentiment will create an atmosphere that breeds anti-Muslim violence. Now, if we must not aid the hatred of Muslims, why is it okay to aid the hatred of Jews? I don't know whether you saw this guy. Well, I think it does. I don't know whether you saw. Did you watch this guy's video? Did you look at it? No, hang on. I'm answering your question.
Yeah, I know.
Did you look? Okay. So
yes,
30 times, at least. No, well, let me finish. You want to finish? Let me finish. At least 30 times he said, "Gas the Jews, gas the Jews." He was laughing. You don't think that will incite hatred or violence against Muslims? Because it's exactly what he said. I have the quote here, June. I'm sorry, it's exactly what he said. You said inflammatory language, even if it's legal, creates an atmosphere where violence can happen. So you don't think shouting "gas the Jews" 30 times is inflammatory language?
Okay, so I honestly don't know where to go with this.
Do you think "gas the Jews" is inflammatory language? There's somewhere to go.
I've just won an award for challenging anti-Semitism. I write for a Jewish newspaper. I'm actually going to Geneva to receive another award for challenging anti-Semitism by the Jewish community. I don't want to make it about anti-Semitism and my views, because they're quite well known. I do want to make it about the difference between hate speech and comedy, if I may. Because the two examples you're giving, whether it's challenging anti-Muslim bigotry or it's indeed challenging Islamist extremism, which I'm better known for doing, by the way, challenging extremism that comes from my own communities. Hate speech is when you're inciting violence specifically. I don't see it the same as comedy, and that's the debate I think we should be having.
Who says it's comedy?
Hold on. Let me explain. Because in comedy, when cracking jokes, it's the intention of the comedian that matters, and it's the intention as stated at the beginning of this very video that we're discussing, where the comedian himself says, "I'm doing this joke because I wish to upset my girlfriend because her dog
That's OK then.
Well,
so shout gas the Jews as much as you want.
Let me explain what he said, and then we can discuss it. He says because this pug is the cutest dog that we have. It's the cutest thing we can think of. And turning it into a Nazi, the uncutest thing that he says on the video, is something I'm doing as a joke to offend the Nazis and to wind up my girlfriend. Now, during the Nazis, a Hungarian did the same thing. The Nazis accused this Hungarian man of training his dog to do a Nazi salute. Well, you know what they did? They then prosecuted this Hungarian man. They did exactly the same thing because they were offended that they were being compared to dogs. And so, actually, with comedy, it comes down to intention and interpretation. And what I'm suggesting... And context.
Let me ask you this. I hear what you're saying, and I'm a long way going down the road. If you were running, I don't know, a French satirical magazine, would you knowingly put on the cover a cartoon of Mohammed, knowing how it upsets Muslims?
So again, during that time, and actually 2 years before the Charlie Hebdo attacks, I posted a picture of the Prophet Muhammad on Twitter and said I'm not offended and that Muslims should grow up and grow a spine. And then the Charlie Hebdo attacks happened, and I was very vocal about defending the magazine and still remain vocal about it. So it is all right to deliberately... I'm just asking, I'm not saying you're wrong, but it is all right to deliberately cause offence? Yes. Because you've got every right to take offence, right? But at the end of the day, you've got no right to insist that I don't offend you. And the difference between inciting hatred is when you what's called targeted hate, when your speech is targeting specifically and inciting violence against a minority.
Lastly, then I will yield the floor. Someone once did some pretty foul gags about Katie Price, a.k.a. Jordan's son, who has various learning disabilities, but we won't get into. He's not here to... I mean, really vile gags.
You know the solution?
Are they permitted?
No, you see, permitted, what we're talking about is a criminal offence. I don't like those jokes. I don't like this joke. We're talking about sending a criminal conviction, sending somebody to jail. That's why I think we're mixing topics here.
But can you do vile gags about a disabled boy?
Legally, you can do them. I will object to them. I don't find this joke funny.
Are you now dancing on the head of a pin, Majid?
No, because we're talking about
what you're saying is what the ramifications should be.
We're talking about saying you're a criminal now for this joke, which is very different saying I don't like the joke. That's not dancing on the head of a pin. That's the same as a debate, actually, that Carole raised the other time when I said, look, the difference between inciting anti-Muslim bigotry, you should be legally entitled to say what you want as long as you're not inciting violence, but be careful outside the context of comedy that you're not inciting hate. Jokes are jokes. Because it's not a joke.
You've never done anything as inflammatory as
Majid, here's what the actual judge had to say on the issue and why he ruled the way he did. In my view, it is a reasonable conclusion that the video is grossly offensive. The description of the video as humorous is no magic wand. This court has taken the freedom of expression into consideration, but the right to freedom of expression also comes with responsibility. And I have to say, Majid, when you first raised the topic, I agreed with you, but I hadn't seen the video. And then when I saw the video, I thought, at some point, we have to draw the line.
Well,
and you know what? He's not going to do that again, is he?
You can't send people to prison for offending us. That's the point. Can we hear what the comedian had to say? And then, Rachel, you can come in. Here's what the comedian himself had to say.
I'm not an anti-Semite, and I made this video to off my girlfriend. That is the literal reality of the situation, but if the court wants to completely reject that reality and substitute it with its own, well, unfortunately, that's not up to me.
Yeah, now, if I were to be lampooning ISIS, I would be imitating some of their language and some of their slogans. But it's clear, especially if I, at the beginning of the video, say I'm now lampooning them, that I'm actually, it's a comedy sketch, whether you find it funny or not.
Use hateful language anyway.
Well, of course you can.
I tried to write about this last week, and in the end, my newspaper decided not to run my piece because I was saying much what Majid said. Which
not
is
as well, I would
obviously not as well. This is a video that is still on YouTube, that has been viewed 3 million times. I don't think there have been any complaints from it. It's...
No users complained.
No users have complained. It's a joke not against the Jews, but against the Nazis. Context is all when it comes to telling a joke, and we are now allowing our courts to decide what's funny or not, which essentially means the death of comedy. If this man goes to prison for essentially telling a joke, it's not just the death of comedy, it really means we need a First Amendment in this country. We need to have a law defending free speech. Otherwise, nobody will say anything because they can breach some... They can be accused of hate speech by a judge who doesn't get the joke. It's really serious.
Couple of things. Nazis are dogs.
Couple of things here. You know, we need to be aware there'll be people from the British Jewish community who are watching now who feel very, very concerned. So we must offer them respect.
Yes.
And you're right, but with the
solidarity.
right to free speech comes the responsibility. And this old line, you can shout fire in a crowded cinema, but it's a pretty irresponsible thing to do. So we have the rights, but we have to be responsible how they're discharged. And I would argue that, I'm with June, I think that bloke went too far, much as
but
the one
he should
involving
go to
Kate.
prison.
No.
So I think
I'm sorry, he is being sentenced next month.
If you were in, if you were in a film, and a comedy film, and you shouted fire in a cinema, and then the comedy film showed the reaction. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about in real life shouting fire in a cinema where people will get trampled.
You see, there was a very good example. I remember a movie came out some years ago which said it was going to lampoon, I think, ISIS fighters or Muslim terrorists. It was called Three Lions. Yeah. And everybody went raving mad. In fact, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's an absolute comedy about, thank the Lord, how often they are enabled. That is what comedy at its best.
That's good comedy, Nick.
Yeah,
bad comedy shouldn't be criminalised. I just want to say one last thing on this, actually. I said it was a Hungarian that did it to the Nazis. It was actually a Finnish man who did it to the Nazis, just to clarify that. But look, that's when comedy works. And bad comedy shouldn't be criminalised.
Yeah,
that's the
whether you find it funny isn't the point. It's about his right to say it.
Yes.
Nobody thinks he should be sent to prison.
Or get a criminal record for a bad joke, guys. Come on.
You guys keep on saying that this is comedy. You have defined this as comedy. Lots of Jewish people in the current climate will not think this is comedy.
Yeah. We are talking of comedy. Now let's go comedy decades back. It was the 70s after all. But is Pandora a traitor to the Me Too movement or a breath of fresh air? That's next, after the break. For a brief moment, it looked as though another star was going to clamber aboard the #MeToo bandwagon. Actress Pam Dawber starred opposite Robin Williams in the hit comedy show from the 70s, Mork and Mindy, and was interviewed for an upcoming biography on the comic who died in 2014. Her memories of working with Williams? Quotes, "I was flashed, humped, bumped, grabbed," recalled 66-year-old Pam. And she added he would sometimes wrestle her to the ground and lie on top of her or appear stark naked when they're about to start filming, much like Rachel. None of which am I seeking to defend, and all of which is way beyond the normal biff and bat of workplace hijinks. However, just as I feared Scotland Yard might try to get involved, knowing their love of pursuing cases involving celebrities long since departed, I noticed Dawber's closing comment, and I quote, "It was so much fun. It was the 70s after all." Judging events of decades ago by today's puritanically paralysed Moors is absurd. Let's move on. There's nothing to see here.
That was almost as good as my storm in a D-cup. Well, as you know, I'm a strong supporter of both Me Too and Time's Up. But I do think, and actually, Rachel, you and I have discussed this, what needs to happen is a much more nuanced debate. And at the moment, we're conflating slightly inappropriate behaviour with real sexual harassment and real sexual assault, in the same way that we know that there's a difference between a shoplifter and an armed robber, and the conversation we have about the two are completely different. So I think the good thing about what Pam has done is perhaps it will actually open up that nuance within this conversation and allow more women to express themselves and not feel victimised all the time, because she's saying she wasn't a victim. She's saying that actually that was the culture at the time, and she found it quite funny.
We opened the show with you quite rightly being labelled as being hysterical, Rachel. Has there been hysteria here, though? Again, not condoning recent acts, but we go back, as June rightly says. Has there been a degree of hysteria in #MeToo?
It's not hysteria.
My point on Me Too is that if we're not going to be like Leave and Remain, constantly at war. We've got to take #MenToo along with the Me Too movement. It cannot be oppositional. It's got to be united.
Yes.
But going to your Nanu Mork and Mindy case, which I think is hysterical and also refreshing.
In what way refreshing?
Well, in the sense that it's a woman refusing to be a victim.
Rachel wishes that Robbie Williams gave her that much attention.
Accepting that, you know, male-female relations can be a bit of a rough and tumble. But however, it was the 70s, is the Jimmy Savile defence. And I'm
respect.
Carole and I are of the age where, we're pretty robust when it comes to these things, and we absolutely refuse, to accept that we are victims, and, you have to allow things to happen to you. However, if Robin Williams had stripped off, he was a jolly hairy man. I don't think I would have gone through this next scene.
It was also the Cosby defence, in defence of your point, and so we do need to be slightly careful.
No criminality here with
Indeed,
Morgan
and that was my next
Pandora.
point. That was going to be my next point.
But that
actually
is
backing
my
up June.
point. Yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth. So in that, yes, the defence can sometimes fall apart. In the Cosby case and in the Jimmy Savile case, it clearly does fall apart because you can't just say that was the 70s when you're raping children or drugging women, right? Yeah. But actually, to June's point, we do have to differentiate between various types of assaults. I think you're right, June. We have to be able to... But somebody tried that, didn't they? Matt Damon. Well, tried to differentiate and parse out the residents and got shouted down.
Let's go to cases where we have got as much detail as we can work with. Carole, strangely quiet, but I sense of all the people around the panel...
I'm just waiting my turn.
Yes, indeed. You're probably the closest to my thinking on this, I would guess.
I wanted to cheer this woman because I think she pricked the moral pomposity of some of the Me Too Time's Up brigade. I really resent this idea that women are reduced to a quivering mass of fear and nerves if a guy brushes your hair, or if he makes a lunge at you, or if he grabs your ass. The idea that we can't, most women can't. Oh no, seriously. But the thing, but we're not quivering. We're not weak. We're not these powerless in the face of unwanted. But most women aren't. They shouldn't be.
I'll allow you
The idea that you go running to HR because a guy grazes his hand across your knee, that is not abuse, and it's what June was talking about.
Is this a generational thing?
This is this is a
Carole,
woman.
Can we make the point about power? If the man has power over the woman and is, in a position of authority over her, then we have to accept.
We don't have to keep qualifying that.
Right.
We know that that's what we're talking about. But what this lady highlights, Pandora, is the difference between... She saw the difference between fun and mischief and flirting and real predatory behaviour.
Yeah. And there is a difference.
And there's a massive difference. And I'm sorry, in the Me Too Time's Up situations, many people will refuse to see the difference, refuse to admit it's there. And that's...
And I agree with a lot of what you said.
Wow.
Yes. Some of it, not so much. Not the running to HR bit, because I think that's what HR is there for.
Some girls won't be able to take it.
Yeah, and I think that's what HR is there for. We need due process.
But isn't the way it's done, the way this flirting is done, that makes the difference? He was a funny guy.
Yeah, but anyway, what I'd love to do is show a clip of Tarana Burke, who's the founder of the Me Too movement. Here's what she has to say.
Sexual violence is deeply pervasive, and it touches everybody across race, class, and gender and ability. And so we have to kind of find ways to work together in order to move the needle.
And I think back to Rachel's point about men too, is where sexual harassment and sexual assault is concerned, it's usually a small group of men actually committing the majority of the crimes. So in the case of Harvey Weinstein, it was him in that company doing the majority of the harassment. Yeah. And I think this is the problem. It's not the majority of men. It's a few men that are actually doing a lot of harm. And so therefore we should make sure that the conversation is clear.
June, when Matt Damon tried to make I think it was Matt Damon, wasn't it? Tried to make the nuanced point you're making about the categorisation of the different crimes.
Yeah.
Shoplifting isn't armed robbery. He wasn't just shouted down, he was like hounded. He was hounded. He had to, and it's like, I think
that's wrong.
A man needs to be able to make this point as well as a woman.
It can't be a female-only conversation.
No, that's the reason. Yeah. That's the reason
why. Can I just see what Catherine Deneuve, if you remember, she spoke out at the time, against the Me Too brigade, and she says, what began as freeing women up to speak has today turned into the opposite. We intimidate people into speaking correctly, shout down those who don't fall into line, and those women who refuse to bend are regarded as complicit and traitors. And I'm afraid that's what's happened in many ways to the Me Too.
So how has the dialogue won back, June?
But I think it's important that women like ourselves who think the way we do, that we stand up, and actually we're the ones that create a space for men to enter the conversation. And I do think it's evolving. I do think don't forget, this has just started. So we're at the beginning of this. I do think it's evolving.
Majid, without doubt, Robin Williams would have been a complex and challenging character to work with. A bit like you and Carole Malone in many ways. I mean, the similarities. No, the workplace, has it changed forever? The dynamic in the workplace now?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that I think that in many cases for the better, because of course some of these. So in many cases, I said, in many cases for the better, because some of these excesses that occurred during the workplace were criminal, and so if we can stop at least most of those criminal sides of the transgressions.
Carole, you shrug, but if young women were being illegally preyed upon...
I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about how the rules that are now in place will make it almost impossible for any workplace banter. Men and women have to be able to interact in the workplace. You know, when you think about it, many people's relationships are formed in the workplace.
But Carole, don't you think we do need to have...
There's one.
I would never have had sex in the workplace, and I've never had a day in the workplace.
So I think some of the rules now in place are, you know...
But Carole, don't you think we do need rules?
We do need rules.
We do need people to know what the boundaries are.
We do, but as Catherine Deneuve just said, it's turned into a movement where people have to speak correctly, and they have to be careful about every word they say, every gesture they make, every touch they make. You know, can a guy, would you in an office now touch a woman's arm?
But maybe it's going to take that to get to...
It might calm down.
Yeah, exactly.
The dust might settle.
History normally says it just builds on itself, doesn't it?
Well, because, no, you know why? Because if you put these rules down that are so impossible to adhere to and are so unhuman, you know, because human beings, whether with a man or a woman, I will do this, right? You know, you see me around my guy friends, my arms around them all the time. You know? What they call it, horseplay.
Yeah.
So,
would you do it with a woman in the office now? Would you put an arm around your shoulder?
I think it will calm down.
You're still going on those single men's weekends to Amsterdam all the time. You're still going on those.
Yeah.
What is it all about?
I think the dust will settle. I think it will.
Everybody, the statute of limitations on this topic has expired. Okay. You're watching The Pledge on Sky News, and up next, I'm asking, have we lost the true meaning of Easter? I was under the impression that Christmas came but once a year. So why, pray, are the nation's shopkeepers hawking us turkey for our Eastertide tables? Panettone, stollen, decorations, trees, the sort of fare, in fact, you might find in a traditional German Christmas market. I don't dare switch on the TV in case there's a gloopy John Lewis advert to try to get us to give each other Easter prezzies, or an advert for eggs without saying Easter on them, or another repeat of the pledge. This is still a Christian country. The egg is a symbol of Christ's resurrection. Holy Week is the most important Christian celebration of the year. Of course, we all love a chalky egg, but don't let Easter too become a marketing, shopping and eating opportunity, just devoid of ritual and meaning. Now, and as the Easter bunny only comes once a year, I have got some examples of Easter marketing for you. Here we have, that's got no mention of Easter on it. Who wants that one? Smarties. No, I've got something special for you. I'm giving it to our Smarty Pants. And this is a pink unicorn. I mean, does that say Easter to you? As it's a unicorn, I thought we should give it to Carole because she still believes in Brexit.
Brexit is going to happen, Rachel.
This is an egg that says... you want this for your kids. This says Easter in tiny writing.
I like my creamy eggs.
But finally, for June, this is a proper Easter egg, which has got a book explaining the Easter story and the meaning of Easter. It says called The Real Easter Egg. It's literally the most worthy thing you've ever seen. It's in a recyclable book. All of it.
Share this, Nick.
What a pity. What a pity. You can have the unicorn.
No, I'm good.
You also believe in Brexit.
Now, can we put our marketing opportunities away so we can talk about the meaning of Easter?
Rachel. We're bar humbug. You sound like Ebenezer Scrooge in that introduction. Look, you know, Easter is still about religion. It's still about Christ and the resurrection. But it's also an opportunity for companies on the side to peddle a bit of wear and make a bit of profit, especially if they've got stock left over from Christmas. What do they do with it? They're recycling trees and turkeys. Those turkeys are going to rot unless they sell them. I mean, look, it's no exaggeration. They've introduced turkeys for Easter. Have a look at this. This is, apparently, that's an Easter turkey. Doesn't look too much different from a Christmas turkey.
Yeah, she did say that.
Yes. But you see, because that would go to waste otherwise, they're trying to sell it. And so let them. You know, no one's stopping you also celebrating.
Britain and we've just got to buy up the old stock.
I am a Christian, as you know, and I'm a practicing one, but this country's becoming more and more secular, so Easter doesn't mean what it used to for the majority. No, not necessarily. I think it's something. It doesn't mean what it once did for a lot of people.
Why are we doing it?
I know
then?
what I
It has
want.
no meaning.
Well, it's the time for families to come together.
It's the Anglo-Saxon goddess Oster, the goddess of fertility. I mourn the loss of her memory. That's what I mourn.
You know, you were talking about the commercialisation of it. The trouble is that commercialisation only happens with consent. And people had to start losing faith in Christianity before the manufacturers were allowed to rush in. And the problem isn't that Easter has been commercialised. It's what's important is that religion isn't putting out a strong enough message to draw people in. And that's part of, you know, in the late 16th century, Baroque churches were built to attract people to come to the church. It was a commercialisation of the religion, if you like.
Well, I've got a solution.
And people had to come and they paid to be in the...
I have a solution to that, and it's a four-letter word, and it begins with F, and I will tell you the solution in just a moment. Oh, yes, but for many reasons. So who thought Brexit was the big debate? It's exit, isn't it? And this is what...
Blair would say exit.
And this is what Nestlé UK want to get across. In our confectionery archive, we have examples and records of thousands of Easter products from down the decades. Most of them don't refer to Easter explicitly on the packaging. Chocolate eggs have been synonymous with Easter and the Easter story since the beginning of the last century, so the association is an automatic one. These products are clearly made and sold specifically for the Easter season. The wording on these products has changed very little over time. Good point you make that people don't go to church. I respect the fact you do. Do you know what I think's gone out of church? And that's fear. The F letter, the F word is fear. Because I think in some instances the reason that I enjoy, and my late father was not a practicing Catholic, was a Catholic, the lady I'm with at the moment is Catholic, I love the sense of fear in a Roman Catholic service, in that that you have to do that, and that you, in a way that you might have been a sinner, and you have to be careful. And I think the way we went down a very dangerous and rather retrograde step when we had vicars playing guitars that's the word. Thank you. Happy clappy vicars playing guitar. I like a bit of fear that if you don't behave yourself, God will have his judgment. You'll all go to hell, and that's it. And that's my Easter message. We're all going to hell.
You know about the meaning of Easter at all? It's about redemption and rebirth.
That's a bit of no, that's love. That is not fear.
The point about being a Catholic, though, in the lead up to Easter, in my family, I'm sure in yours, it was 6 weeks of torture. It was Lent. You had to do it without. And you had to go to church, and you had to do the Stations of the Cross.
And then you've got your chocky egg.
But you know what? You only ever got one off your mum and dad, and maybe one off your nan, and that was the end of it. There was no big celebration other than kneeling in Stations of the Cross.
We used to dream of having eggs.
Cadbury's do say they're very big on Easter, and they fit it into all their products during this season. But what I will say is that what swung me against your debate is when I saw the Easter tree, because actually I thought it was like a Christmas tree, but they've actually designed a tree that very much looks like Easter.
Oh, that's lovely.
Because of the eggs. Now, you know, it's difficult to criticise that, because even though it's a tree, we associate trees with Christmas. That does look like an Easter tree.
It's not a recycled Christmas tree.
But this also puts a lot of pressure on families, I think, as well. You know, Christmas is really expensive for a lot of families. You're just getting over that. And wham, it's Easter again. But it's not just the eggs, it's all of this nonsense that goes with it as well. So I think it's a massive pressure on families. People try to get the perfect Christmas, now they're trying to get the perfect Easter. And it won't happen.
Well, and then, of course, we had the millennials jumping on board. We have the Easter avocado egg.
Oh, yes.
Have we seen that?
I think we've got
I did think that was...
What's this?
This is...
Okay, I'm going to test for the panel. I know that
chocolate.
this is shown over the Easter weekend as well, but what is today? What is the official name of today?
Oh, it's
Maundy Thursday. What's tomorrow?
Easter, Good Friday.
Good Friday. Okay, so we're on board the Easter bus.
That's well, you got any more?
But it's interesting. One poll said 43% of young people didn't believe in the resurrection, which is very sad.
And what happened on Maundy Thursday?
He was starting to walk. Yes. And then
what happened on Good Friday?
He walked up the hill with the cross.
Yeah.
And what does the cross mean? You know, all of this stuff is being lost. It's all just about the Christmas.
No, but people know that story.
Of course.
I wonder whether we're of a different generation.
But the crucifixion is a sign of belief in Christianity.
It's not being lost because we're making chocolate.
Exactly.
It's being lost because of Carole's point.
Yes.
Because of the failure of the church.
Yeah, it's not because companies whose responsibility it isn't to teach Easter.
The Catholic Church has grown because of the number of Eastern Europeans. You go to parts of London.
Immigration. But that's because of immigration. That's not because of the indigenous community. So what you're saying is right. That's not because of native British.
So we can link it to Brexit.
No.
Matt, can I ask you,
Yes.
because, you know, what I was saying, society is becoming more and more secular, or not Christian. As a Muslim, what does Easter mean to you? And how do you celebrate it, if
one
at
of the
all,
core
with your
tenets,
family?
so Muslims believe in Jesus as a prophet.
I know,
one of the core
yes.
tenets of Islam that it differs with over Christianity is that they believe that Jesus wasn't crucified, that God basically saved his prophet. And apart from, therefore, the Easter story is kind of, it's not really in sync.
Yes.
But the return of the Messiah,
you believe
we
that.
go back to that, right?
Okay.
So the bit that's missing is the Easter bit, which is why perhaps I'm slightly indulgent with the chocolate, because it's like, for me, it is, you know, it's always been a secular holiday.
We have to
sense.
exit from this conversation because you know what it's like. It's the end of term. Everyone's a bit tetchy, wishing it was already the holidays and wondering why it's not sunny outside. Well, Commons Speaker John Bercow found a way to let off steam this week, lambasting Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson for daring to call his Labour counterpart, Emily Thornberry, by her married name.
Say no, says the noble and learned lady, the Baroness, whatever it is, I can't remember what it is. Newgee. What an extraordinary thing.
We do not address people by the titles of their spouses. The Shadow Foreign Secretary has a name, and it's not Lady something. We know what her name is, and it is inappropriate and frankly sexist to speak in those terms. And I'm not having it in this chamber.
Yes. Love that guy.
Ugh.
Yes.
Speaker Bercow, for that confected rant, you win our squeaker of the week.
No, spot
it
on.
made me
Nonsense.
sick.
No way.
You know
Why?
One at a time.
Being accused of bullying.
June
in the
Supple.
comments.
I completely agree with Speaker Bercow.
Can I say
Sexist and not funny.
OK, we refer
Rachel
to his
Johnson.
wife as Sally Bercow. We refer to the Prime Minister as Mrs May, which is a title held by her husband.
Mrs May has referred
She
to
was
her.
That's the name
born-
she uses.
She was
Emily
born Theresa
Thornberry uses her
Brazier.
own name.
Mrs
I
May
know,
has
but-
referred to her as Lady Nugee as well, and nobody said a word.
It's about self-identification, right? So my missus has kept her family name.
Yeah.
And so for somebody to then call her by my name is the problem. If she had changed her name voluntarily,
Then we wouldn't
that's
have a
different.
problem.
He
In
did
a
it-
sentence.
He did it to curry favour with Labour because he thinks he's going to get ousted as Speaker.
Of course,
Simple
yeah.
as that.
There you go, John Bercow, and that's it for this week and this season of The Pledge. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Happy Easter, and thanks for watching.